Hello, split and share. Hello, welcome out there. This is Michelle. My name is Michelle Chambers. I am a person that goes live talking about grief. I don't usually go live on here. I usually go live on another platform, but I just wanted to jump on here. I do a lot of videos on here, just letting people know that you're not alone on this grief journey. A lot of times we can feel so isolated and so alone. And I just wanted to jump on for a little while just to talk about behind the grief wall. There are so many things that we deal with, as I call behind the grief wall. That's my terminology. But I wanted to talk about that because there's so many times that we deal with things and nobody seems to know what's going on with us, and sometimes as grievers we don't know what's going on with us. So I wanted to talk about that today, and I have 20 things that I want to talk about that I say are behind the grief wall. I have a Sorry you guys, I didn't get it out. I'm thinking this is going to be backwards. Okay, it's not. Well, great. And I have what I call my makeshift grief wall here, and the way I see it is when we start looking at it, at this grief wall. On the front side of the wall, those are the non-grievers. On the back side of this wall are grievers. And the non-grievers know that our person passed, right? They know that the funeral. They may, and when it comes to the grief wall, people may see us getting dressed and going to work and smiling and laughing and getting on social media and answering the phone and responding to text messages. And they're like, oh, she's doing better. He's doing better. But they don't realize that there are a lot of things that are going on behind the grief wall. And that's what I want to talk about, because there are so many times that people know that our person passed. Maybe they attended the funeral or the memorial service. Maybe they came by the house and brought casseroles or two, or they sat with us for a while, or they brought flowers by, or to the funeral, they signed the sign-in book, all those different things that they do. And that's fantastic because they don't have to do any of that. But they don't realize that there are a lot of other things on the back side of this wall that we're dealing with. Like, I've got a lot of things here, you guys. We're dealing with a whole lot of things. And people don't realize it many times that we're going through a whole lot. Exhaustion. When you're going through grief, you can just be mentally and physically exhausted. And people don't realize that because as a society, we don't talk much about grief. Loneliness. You could be lonely and you're in a room full of people and you still feel lonely. Our identity. We've lost our identity. We're trying to figure out, who am I now? Now that my person is not here, who am I? Like, what do I do now? And part of our identity dies when our person does, and we're trying to figure out, how do I do life now? Who am I? And again, the list just goes on and on. Guilt, anger, PTSD. Like, am I going to die next? Or who's going to not die next that's close to me? All those type of things that we go through. But people just know that our person passed. They don't realize that we're going through all of these things behind the grief wall. Welcome in, you guys. And so, the loss of friends and family, we deal with the loss of friends and family many times. It could be because they just don't understand our journey, so they disappear on us, right? And sometimes it's because we realize we can't handle, we don't have any peace, and we need that peace. We're missing their voice, the loss of financial security, the depending on what your relationship. My husband passed a year and a half ago. We were married for 35 years. I knew him for 37 years. And the loss of financial security is a real thing. I've gone from a two-income household to a one-income household. That changes things drastically. The empty seat in the car, the or the empty seat at the table, loss of purpose and direction. We're trying to figure out who we are. The loss of our future, nighttime grief, TVs and movies. The list goes on and on. But people just see this. They know our person passed. They know that person not there, and then all of a sudden they see us back at work, they see us on social media, and they're thinking that all is well. They don't realize that we're still dealing with grief. But grief lasts a lifetime. We learn how to carry it over time, and we get to the place prayerfully so we can carry love and loss at the same time, because they do coexist. But people don't realize that because we don't talk about grief much. So I want to talk about behind the grief wall, 20 things that people never see. And these are just a few things because there are so many things, right? The grief of not being able to give financially the way you used to people. That's one for me anyway. My husband and I used to do quite a bit to help, and I can't do like I used to could. It's ironic that I'm talking about this now because I just got a text, from somebody asking me, can I help? With different schools and stuff starting up now, and those kids are doing this and that, different fundraisers. I really can't right now. I can't. I want to. I'd love to, but I'm having to try to watch the budget. I've never had to do that. My husband did all of that. And so when you lose your spouse, you've lost more than the person. You lost financial security. You've lost having somebody to ask and to get advice from, or to get wisdom from on what to do. Should I do this? Should I not do that? What do you think about this? There are a lot of secondary losses that we've got that we deal with, on this journey. The empty traditions. We still have traditions, and we have to decide: are we going to keep those traditions that we've been doing, or are we going to tweak them, or we're going to change them some, or we're going to just toss them out completely, because it changes us. Grief changes us, and now we have to decide. And the thing about it is, it's okay for you to make those decisions and decide what's best for you. Maybe you decide I can't keep those same traditions. Maybe you decide I want to keep them. Maybe I just want to tweak them just a little bit, and that's fine too. And there's so many other things along the way, that the holidays and birthdays and anniversaries, and we have to decide how to do those things. The way the house sounds different now that the voice and the footsteps are gone. That's huge. If the person lived with you, that's huge. Quiet can be so loud when we're going through grief. The grief of medical paperwork, insurance, and the business of all the debt details that need to be taken care of. Those are behind the grief wall, things that we have to deal with. But as a society, people that see us in general don't realize that we're dealing with all those things. They just know, hey, we're back at work now. We're on social media. We went out to a restaurant with friends and we took pictures, or we went on a cruise and we have some pictures to prove it. But they don't realize that we're still dealing with a lot of things that have to do with the passing of our loved one, and we're still trying to figure out who we are in the midst of all of that. The way friendships change after loss. That's another behind the grief wall. People don't see how, some of the things that we deal with. And when we're realizing that friendships change, and sometimes for the better. And many times on this journey, I've met so many wonderful friends now that I didn't know before. And I said, I've met some of the most wonderful people that I never wanted to meet, because grief brought us together. And so even in the midst of going through grief, just know that, friendships may change. And a lot of times that's a part of the process. And don't let that just, shake you to your core. Just realize that that is a possibility that may happen. I wrote down, some friendships become deeper, others become distant, because they do. You just never know, what that friendship is going to look like. And next thing you know, maybe you haven't talked to them in a while. And others, maybe now you're starting to talk to different people that you hadn't talked to before, and that's okay too. You may discover some relationships were connected to your spouse or to that person, your loved one that passed, in the life that you had together. So now relationships are not, as prevalent as they were. The pain of watching family grieve differently and not knowing how to help. We all grieve differently on this journey. Some of us, we just do it differently. Some of us be crying a whole lot. Some of us will be not crying. Some of us will just seem like nothing ever even happened on this journey. But everybody deals with grief differently. The fact is just to be reminded that you need to deal with your grief, or your grief will deal with you. It's so important for us to deal with our grief. And, one person may cry constantly, one person may just be quiet, and that's okay. Another one, the quiet anger, when people say you're so strong and they have no idea what we're going through. And sometimes, they mean well when they say that, but sometimes as we go through grief on this journey, it's a lot harder than people realize. And we are strong, but it's just in a different way. Strength, when you're going through grief, looks different. It can look like getting out of bed in the morning. That's strength. Getting up to take a shower or brush your teeth or go to work. Strength looks different when you're going through grief. And I do have a lot of music out here, and it's on YouTube as well. You guys, a lot of grief songs. One of my songs is called Strength Looks Different Now, because it so looks different on this journey. This is number 9 of my 20 things. The shame or confusion around desire, touch, and your changing body after loss. And this is one of the conversations that people kind of avoid. People don't talk a whole lot about it. We Our heart is grieving. We're having a hard time. And in the midst of all that, we start thinking that, I need to work on this and that and other. We keep going on and we just kind of downing ourselves. And I normally say, look at your things that you're saying. Would you say these to a friend of yours if you knew they were feeling that way? Chances are probably not. So I encourage you to say, what would you say to a friend of yours? Say that to yourself. Number 10, the grief of clutter. Clothes, shoes, tools and that can't be moved or you can't afford to keep. All those things that we deal with, that's behind the grief wall. Whether the things that we say, I'm keeping this, and so now we got this extra clutter because we can't let go of it, and that's fine if that's where you are. I've got things that I'm not letting go of, and then there are certain things that you can't afford to keep, and then that can be hard too because I'd like to keep it, but I can't afford to. We deal with so many things behind this grief wall. Number 11, the invisible weight of decision fatigue. When you realize now that you're the adult that has to make those decisions, decision fatigue is real. If you're feeling decision fatigue, I don't know what to do. And sometimes, it's when we're dealing with grief, sometimes it's as simple as I don't even know what to have for dinner because it takes a lot of mental energy. And when we're going through grief, a lot of times it can be really hard to make those decisions. Just know that you're not alone if you're feeling that way. Grief brain is such a real thing that we deal with on this journey. There are decisions everywhere. What needs to be repaired? What bill needs to be paid? What appointments need to be scheduled? What should you do with the house? What happens to the car? Who do you call? When do all these different things that goes on and on. And now we don't have that person that was there to ask them, what do you think about this? Now it's on us to make those decisions. Number 12, the way grief shows up in your health. Sleep, blood pressure, pain, flares, exhaustion, all those things that we deal with behind the grief wall. People don't realize that grief is physical and it affects us. And it's so important for us to do our grief work on this journey. Because if we don't deal with our grief is going to deal with us. And how does it deal with us? Physically. Because grief is internal, it's on the inside, and it's not going anywhere. And if you're trying to stay really busy at work and with church and family and friends, so you don't have to deal with your grief, I'm going to admonish you. That's not a good thing to do. It's okay if you're doing your grief work and then you still, try to stay busy. But if you're just staying busy primarily so you don't have to think about grief, mm-mm, somebody say out there, no, don't do that. Number 13, the second loss of identity when you're no longer someone else's wife or husband or daughter or child. And even though technically we are, especially when it comes to family members, other than spouses, but it's hard trying to realize that, like, who am I now? And I've done a few lives talking about that, not on this platform, but on other platforms, talking about who am I? I'm used to me. I'm used to being Andrew's wife. 35 years, known for 37 years. My whole life has changed. I'm trying to figure out who am I now. I used to being Howard's daughter and Clara's daughter. My dad passed in 2019. My mom passed in 2021. My husband passed a year and a half ago, and I'm trying to learn how to navigate this journey. We have to rediscover who we are and just remind ourselves that we're not becoming less of a person. We're just becoming different. 14, the ache of not being able to call or text them about small everyday things. So behind the grief wall. People don't realize that. It's like it could be something so small and minute, but I just wanted to share it with them. And we can't. And I know somebody will say, oh, well, yes, you can. You can just kind of talk to them. Y'all know what I mean. Y'all know what I mean. And sometimes it's not the big moments that hurt. Sometimes it's just the little moments too. You know. Number 15, the weird guilt of laughing, dating, feeling attracted to someone again, smiling about something. You're watching a TV show, all those different things that may cause us to want to smile or to laugh, and we feel guilty about it. And I just want to encourage you that when you have those guilty feelings, tell yourself, I don't have to feel guilty. I'm just learning how to carry love and loss now. Because it takes time for us to get there. And once you get there and you can laugh, genuinely laugh about something, tell yourself you're learning how to carry love and loss. You're not betraying them. You're not being disloyal to them. You're learning how to carry both of them because joy and sorrow can coexist. Grief and hope can coexist. Love and loss can coexist. Number 16, the grief of milestones that they miss. They're missing graduations and weddings and the new babies coming and all that. And that's hard. And that's behind the grief wall. And people don't realize a lot of times that, they'll say, oh, like my daughter had a baby. People say, "Oh, congratulations on a new grandbaby," and that's great that they say that. But most people don't think about it's probably a hard. It's kind of bittersweet because my husband wasn't here for the baby being born. People don't think about that. Bittersweet graduations, missing your kids' graduations or nephew, whatever it may have been that would whoever that person was that passed, and now they're missing that. That's a lot. These are moments that we imagine sharing with them, and now we don't get an opportunity to do that. And when we're at those events and those things, it's just we're reminded that someone missing, that someone important is missing, and it hurts. And we're excited, and it hurts at the same time. Welcome out there, you guys. Number 17 on my list of 20 things. The way church or worship can feel both comforting and painful now. Sometimes on this journey, grief and faith can coexist, but I know a lot of times on this journey, it seems like we're in the place of either you grieve, or either you're going to have faith. Which one are you going to do? The thing is, we can have both. Grief and faith can coexist. And church can become a place of refuge, but it can also be a place filled with reminders, and it can make things hard. I've written a song called Church is Just Hard for Me right now. And my prayer is that it will relate to some people out there that you're Christian and you're thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this journey. And so I'm hoping that you will be able to learn how to do that on this journey as you go through. Number 18, the pressure to move on versus the pressure of having the reality of carrying them with you. I know people love to say, oh, you need to move on with your life. Move on tends to denote, when you say move on, that means I'm through with that. I'm not thinking about it anymore. I'm moving on. That's the end of it, right? But that's not what happens with grief. We don't move on. We learn how to carry that person forward with us in a different way in our life. And so if you've been told that, which I hear so often on lives that I do, just remember you don't have to listen to them saying that. Because we don't move on. We don't get over it. We learn how to carry them with us in a different way in our life. And they have those memories and the yeah, don't listen when they say that. Number 19, the financial whiplash of going from two incomes to one income when it comes to, being, if you're in a spouse relationship. It could be, I've had other people that are saying, well, they were taking care of their mom and they, or they live together with the parents and they all kind of share those responsibilities financially. That changes when the person passes and you're trying to figure out, how do I do life now? That's behind the grief wall. One of those things that people don't think about or talk about. They know our person passed, but they don't realize some of the things that we're dealing with behind that grief wall. The financial reality of widowhood can be pretty brutal. A lot of times people say, oh, well, they probably got that insurance money and they're just set for life. The average person is not. There are some people that are, but the average person, I'm here to tell you, you do some research, the average person is not set for life because they have some insurance money coming from a person passing. Number 20, the hidden tenderness of objects like their coffee mug or the side of their bed or their favorite show or a song that when you hear that was just your song. Sometimes an object becomes a doorway to a memory and we don't realize that many times. And all of a sudden it's just like right there in our face. And it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I was going to be thinking about that, it was going to affect me in that way. And, it can be their chair, their shoes. I still have my husband's boots sitting in the same place they were, and it's been a year and a half. I'm just not ready to move them yet, and I'm not going to. And that's okay if you have things like that in your life too, and you do it at your own pace when you're ready, regardless of what other people may say. 100% of the people in your life will never agree with 100% of what you decide to do on this journey. Therefore, you need to do what's best for you. And coming from a counselor standpoint, I always say, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, do what you need to do on your grief journey. And so I just wanted to remind you that if there are certain things that you're dealing with that are behind the grief wall, sometimes take time to explain to somebody. My person passed, but I'm also dealing with this. And then other times you realize, they're probably still not going to understand it. There's no need to even mention it to them. And I just want to encourage you to you're not grieving and you're listening to this, be careful and be gentle with people because you don't know what's behind the grief wall for them. We never know. It takes time for us to learn how to navigate this journey. It takes time. And if that's you out there, take your time. This is Michelle, and I'm the gentle grief voice, as I'm calling myself. I just wanted to share with you to let you know that you're not alone on this journey. And I'm just sharing my heart so that you know that you are not alone. Take and, hope to see you on another live.